By now, much of the world has seen the disturbing body cam footage of 29-year-old Tyre Nichols being beaten to death by 5 Memphis police officers. What those 5 officers did was wrong, was uncalled for, and was criminal. And that is why they will be held accountable in the court of law and have been swiftly charged with second-degree murder. So if you're one of those thugs, those degenerates, those losers who use the death of Tyre Nichols to vandalize, loot, and destroy, you did not do it in the name of justice. You used Tyre as an excuse and a cover to act like a fool, destroy and take things that don't belong to you. And if that's how you honor someone's life, you really need to get a grip on yourself and your behavior, because that ain't it. And even worse, if you use the death of Tyre Nichols to vandalize, loot, and destroy in a city that ain't even Memphis, in a state that ain't even Tennessee, you're a jackass and you're a criminal, period. And if you're a race baiter in the media who used the death of Tyre Nichols at the hands of 5 black police officers to yet again push your theory of rampant racism and white supremacy, you are delusional, and you probably work for MSNBC, CNN, or the DNC.
In a recent opinion piece on CNN.com, Van, you wrote, the police who killed Tyre Nichols were black, but they might still have been driven by racism. And I was struck by the part of the piece where you wrote this: one of the sad facts about anti-black racism is that black people ourselves are not immune to its pernicious effects. Society's message that black people are inferior, unworthy, and dangerous is pervasive. Over many decades, numerous experiments have shown that these ideas can infiltrate black minds as well as white. Self-hatred is a real thing. So you believe this racial bias played a role in the officers' behaviors?
Yeah, I do, because first of all, black people are at risk from police no matter what color. Black, white, brown. You talk to African Americans, they'll tell you it doesn't matter. There's this pervasive view from law enforcement that if you're black, you're dangerous. And I think some people think, oh, well, so a white police officer going after a black person, you understand the racial implications. The problem is there are whole neighborhoods that in many cities are just considered by police departments kind of war zones, and anything goes there. And so I think we have to have a more nuanced view of what's going on to root out racism. It's not just about having black cops or white cops or brown cops. It's about having cops that are trained to respect everyone and who are disciplined and punished when they don't. And when you don't have that in place, black people are at risk no matter the color of the police officer.
Now, Van Jones has become a friend of mine over the years, and I respect him, but this notion that black officers beating a black man is due to white supremacy is some messed up logic and delusional at best. Not everything is about race, Van. Sometimes bad or unprofessional people do bad and unprofessional things, not because of the color of their skin. Melanin does not determine character. Enough with this constant race baiting. You can't blame white people for everything, liberals. That's a cop-out, no pun intended. And guess what else? If you want better officers with better training, perhaps defunding the freaking police and rioting at the site of a proposed public safety training center isn't the answer, geniuses. I just can't with these people. It's no damn wonder our country is so divided, and it's no damn wonder our innocent and decent officers are being attacked and ambushed in record numbers. But what, if anything, could have been done to prevent the death of Tyre Nichols at the hands of those officers? Joining me now is Connecticut Fraternal Order of Police President John Krupinski. John, I want to thank you for coming in. We've got a lot to dive into, so I want to start right off the top here with what happened in Memphis. I know that you've seen the body cam footage. What was your first reaction when you saw it?
You know, when I watched the video, and I watched them all, you see the first video when it came out. When I looked at that, initially, when they took him out of the car and they put him down on the ground, really the incident probably could have been over and should have been over. But what you were seeing is their inability to get him into handcuffs at that time. And there's some reasons for that. Back in the 80s, 90s, you would see what we would call dog pile on a rabbit, where we would get all 5 officers on top of the suspect. Somebody would gain control of a hand, get a cuff on it, roll them over and get that second cuff on. If you notice the first portion of that video, the force used was minimal. There was no body compression because since George Floyd, that's been ruled that they don't want anybody doing that anymore. So it was kind of a play the game and try to coax him into the handcuffs. They gave him directives. He didn't follow any. And ultimately, he was able to get up and run away. The incident probably should have ended right there, but that didn't happen.
Yeah, again, watching it, I am still so confused here because everything that we know thus far that the media has reported, this was a traffic stop that he was pulled over for reckless driving suspicion, and then it escalated to that point. I still feel like there's a lot of missing pieces to this puzzle here, but what I still can't understand from watching it, and it was gruesome and it was very disturbing, is why this young man would not give those officers his hands. They asked for him repeatedly, and he did not do it, and then he tried to flee. I don't know if this is something now that we're just seeing in policing over the last several years, if it's been popularized, but when you watch it, is this something that you're seeing more frequently now in the last several years?
Yeah, 100%. Tommy, this all goes back to the demonization of policing. When you remove respect from policing, and the policing field used to command probably some of the most respect of any field out there. That has kind of been removed from us over the last 5 to 8 years. And once you do that, people think it's okay to fight. People think it's okay to resist. People think it's okay to flee. So yes, we are seeing more of that. And when that happens, unfortunately, things escalate. And then, like in this case, things get out of control.
They certainly did get out of control. And again, the video is very disturbing. Anybody that watched it is disturbed by it. We know that these officers have been charged with second-degree murder, which I want to get to you on that point. But first, this notion of resisting arrest. Now, anytime someone like myself says, hey, don't resist arrest, because if you feel like you've been unjustly arrested or anything has gone wrong during that traffic stop or incident, you can take that up in the court of law and get your justice when you're alive and breathing. If you resist arrest, there's always going to be a chance that something is going to go wrong, and it did in this case, as it has so many other cases. So as somebody who is a police professional who knows so many officers, what do you say to those out there that have been maybe conditioned to believe that resisting arrest is the way to go?
Well, I mean, we see the results time and time again. I don't know what it would take for somebody to realize that. Everyone gets their day in court. Not every arrest is perfect. And people have an opportunity to go to court and defend themselves as to what they think they did or did not do. And that's how it's supposed to be handled. That's the system we have in place. Once you don't do that, things can go awry quickly, which we saw in this case here. Things got out of hand. Things were done that were inappropriate, and now, a young man is dead.
I want to talk about the charges on these officers. They were swiftly charged, which I think a lot of people in the community were happy to see. Second-degree murder charge. Do you think that that was the right charge in this case? And if you were somebody overseeing it, is that the recommendation that you would have made?
Again, in each state, the laws are different. I am not as familiar with the laws out there, obviously, as I am here. What I'm waiting for, and no one seems to be talking about, they must obviously have had it. I'd like to see an autopsy report to see the cause of death. I think that would work towards understanding the charges a little better. We have yet to learn that at this point in time in the investigation.
Yeah, there's still a lot of unanswered questions, and unfortunately, we've entered into a media atmosphere where asking any questions is usually deemed inappropriate, but questions are still important to ask because we're talking about the justice system, and we're talking about a tragedy that could have resulted in riots and protests and these kind of things happening. But I want to get your take on this. Although there was some upheaval over the weekend, some protesting in Memphis, mostly peaceful, around the country, of course, in New York, they were stomping on police cruisers as they normally do. In LA, they were vandalizing police headquarters. We know this, but this wasn't nearly to the level that we saw with George Floyd. Now, people like myself would say it's because they weren't able to weaponize race like they were in the George Floyd case because of the race of both the victim and the officers. Do you think that that's coming into play here?
Yes, that's the bottom line. Had it been 5 white officers, I believe the country would have been torn up as it had been in the past. That was the one thing out of this whole incident that I think calmed things down a little bit.
Yeah, to me, though, that's really difficult to believe that people are not just upset about injustice, that they're upset about race more than injustice. Because you would think that it just should be a matter of if you are somebody that's passionate about ending police brutality or whatever you see as a problem in policing, the race shouldn't matter to the extent that it does, but it certainly does. That's the next question I have for you. Now, there's been some discussion as well about that particular department in Memphis and some of the police chief and some of the hiring practices that have changed over the last couple of years, lowering the standards, introducing more diversity quotas and things of that nature. Does that play a role in this case and in others like it? And what is kind of your warning about this new method and practice in policing we're seeing today?
100% it does. And Tommy, I'll bring this all the way back when we go back into the George Floyd problem and protests after that. Immediately, and you're seeing the left circling right now, calling for more police reforms. And I said way back then, reforms come in different manners. You know, they want to defund the police. Well, what you're seeing now is some of that problem of defunding the police. And when we say defunding, it doesn't mean that they closed them down. It means that budgets were slightly cut. One of the problems here, I think every law enforcement professional across the country realized that the immediate attempt to handcuff that suspect, the training involved wasn't there. They didn't have the ability to properly get the job done. And what I've seen, and I called for this when I testified at our police accountability bill, I said to our legislators, if you really want change and you want accountability, let's start with training. We need to train the officers differently. I continue to hear the left all over the media about a police culture. Well, you haven't thrown any money at it to change anything. Training is the number one thing. And I will tell you now, we're not seeing any more training across the country since George Floyd up until today. And I don't have a whole lot of hope that the politicians are going to put up money to get that done in the future. Now, secondly, when you continue to demonize the police, when nobody wants this job, and it's pretty clear right now, America should realize nobody wants this job anymore. And back in 2020, I made the statement, what are you going to do when all the good cops leave and nobody wants this job? Well, this is what they're doing. They've reduced standards across the country. In some departments, you can be hired with a felony now. In the past, a misdemeanor would get you disqualified. But in their zest to put warm bodies on the street to cover cities, they're hiring anybody and everybody. And Tommy, I'm going to tell you right now, in the future, this is going to get worse, not better with that practice.
Yeah, it certainly is. And, you know, just last weekend, the previous weekend, there was riots and protests in Atlanta over the construction of a proposed public safety training center. So isn't that ironic that from one weekend to the next, we talk about better training, but the weekend prior, you were protesting at what you called a cop city that was designed for more training for police officers? I mean, it's insanity, the delusion of some of these people. But what is wild to me, and I want to talk about policing, we covered it a little bit, but there has been several articles out there, of course, right after this happened in Memphis, that are still trying to blame systemic racism and white supremacy for what happened. There's been several articles, several pundits have already put that out there, that the reason this happened is because deep within them, these black officers hated themselves because there's an anti-blackness in this country and in policing. When you hear something like that attributed to a case like we saw in Memphis, what are your thoughts?
Well, look, clearly in this case, I don't think race played any part of it. All the officers were black. The suspect was black. Again, had it been white officers, you'd see an entirely different response in this country, but that didn't happen because of that. And hats off to Memphis. They've hired pretty close to the ratio of black officers to the black percentage of citizens in their community. So how they're calling this a racist issue, it's beyond me, but that's what the left always does. Everything goes back to race with them.
Yeah, it's super unfortunate because we could be making strides and having real community protection and real reforms and real training. But when you use race as a wedge issue over and over again, you're always going to stop there because you're focusing only on those issues and not on the actual issues of how to respond to an incident like this. Last question I have for you, because yet again, although this is nothing in comparison to what we saw after George Floyd, but again, there's another incident. There's still officers that are bracing for mayhem because of it. What is the morale like for officers that you speak to, that you work with now in this country, and yet another incident like this happens, and more demonization and wave of media coverage is piling on.
Well, exactly what I said earlier. This all contributes to nobody wanting this job. I will tell you, morale in policing across the country is non-existent. Many guys, and I've heard this over and over since this incident, officers saying if they never stopped them, none of this would have happened. And they are right. It would have alleviated the incident. So where do we go from here? To get better officers in your community, you have to have community backing. You have to have backing of your chief. You have to have backing of your mayors. Until these things happening, and it's not widespread across the country right now, that's the reason that morale is what it is. One of the other things, Tommy, that nobody's really talking about, a lot of people have asked me, what are some solutions? Well, there are solutions. We talked about the training, but many people I've heard say, we need more community policing. We need to be at one with our community. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. But no one, not the federal government, not state governments, nobody is putting up 1 cent to accomplish that. We have an awesome relationship with the people of our community in Danbury. Every year we do a huge picnic where the Fraternal Order Police and my guys go up. We supply the burgers, the dogs for the community. And we've had zero problems when all of these other issues across the cities were going on. But you know where that money comes from? It comes out of our pocket. And God bless our chief, our deputy chief. They pull money out of their pocket. They'll give it to me to go fund these functions. But yet you don't hear anybody in Washington, and I don't hear anybody at the Capitol in Hartford saying, what can we do to implement this across the country? They continue to say community policing, but to be at one with your community, there is a cost factor to it. Nobody seems to care.
And beyond that, when you constantly demonize police, it doesn't make it easy for those officers to then engage with the community, because there is a segment of the community that has been taught to fear officers and to hate officers from birth to death. And that is a big part of the problem here.
100%. And that's what, we're trying to do to overcome. But we're constantly seeing, I heard one statement, and it may be true, and I hope it doesn't come to that. But if you continue to demonize the police, you will only be able to hire demons in the future. They need to support the police and fund the police and train the police so things like this don't happen again.
Amen to that. And please, to all the officers that you speak with and work with, please let them know that the silent majority has their back. I certainly do. And that incidents like this, they might in the media cast a shadow on the entire law enforcement community, but to those rational, decent Americans out there, we still love and support the Thin Blue Line. So thank you for all that you do for policing, and thank you for being with me today, John.
Thank you, Tommy. God bless.
God bless you.